The various aspects of the Trinity River project, most notably probably the Trinity Parkway or Tollway, depending on how you look at it, or if you're in the middle, so I've decided, you'll decide what it should be called going forward. But also the other aspects of it at the Trinity Park, and certainly stormwater issues and things like that. So, but with us this morning, I'll start off with former Dallas City Council member Angela Hunt, who's a 4-term member of the Dallas City Council. She served up until year 2013, but she took a very strong position on the Trinity Parkway and was more focused on what the needs of having a Trinity Park instead. She was quite working with Dallas City Council member Scott Briggs and trying to develop the what's called the Trinity Skyline Trail on top of the levees for about 4.5 miles of it, and has also been involved very much certainly with her issues in the city council area. She's a partner with Farrell Gillespie and Keith. So sorry about that. And so we're very happy to have her here this morning. Also, our other council member is a former council member Craig Holcomb, 3-term member of the Dallas City Council back in the 1980s. And Craig has been the executive director for the Friends of Fair Park since 1990. He's been in this job for quite a while and doing a wonderful job with that, so congratulations. He's also the executive director of the Trinity Commons as well. And he's been very involved in trying to, when he was a council member, in dealing with the Dallas Thoroughfare Plan and how that worked through the neighborhoods he represented in East Dallas. And as well has been chairman, oh my gosh, he's been chairman of several Dallas committees, and I have to say, I have to pull a piece of paper out here somewhere, so, of the, here we go, chairman of the Public Safety Committee, chairman of the Police and Firefighters Pension Fund, chairman of the Cultural Affairs Commission. So extensive involvement with the city of Dallas as well. So thank you both for being here this morning. And of course, I can't forget our third speaker, which is our moderator, Brandon Formby. Many of you know him because he is a writer and reporter for the Dallas Morning News. Currently, he serves as a transportation writer for the paper. He's been doing this since 2013 until now. He has this current role. Prior to that, he was the government and politics writer or reporter for the Dallas Morning News from 2007 to 2013. So he has been awarded many awards in his journalistic abilities. As a matter of fact, we're very proud to say last year he was a recipient of the very prestigious Duncan Meany Award from the Greater Dallas Planning Council. So we all know that's the next step. So let's get on. I know you all want to hear what's going to hear our speakers this morning, so I'll turn it over to Brandon. Brandon?
Thank you. So the Trinity River Corridor Project. I think kind of before we get started, if y'all don't mind, if I just kind of give everybody like a crash course of kind of what's happened since the 90s, especially with the road. One of the hardest things about writing about Trinity Parkway is that there's no one Trinity Parkway. There's always multiple versions out there. And the idea has kind of been out there since like the middle of last century. I've actually like traced it back in clips to like the, I think the 50s or the 60s. But we'll kind of start with the Trinity Parkway that we know today, which essentially came about in the late 1990s. It was part of a bond election in 1998, like a $246 million bond election. I believe about 84 million of that was for Trinity Parkway. And at the time, it wasn't really there wasn't the road hadn't been designed. It wasn't like real well formed. And then kind of over the years after that bond election passed, and they started to work more on not just the road but the park, flood control, the different measures for the whole overall corridor project. In 2003, the city came out with the Balanced Vision Plan, which kind of put some images, some ideas, some characteristics on paper about the road. And then that through the engineering process, that road was kind of split. There was like a traffic highway reliever on top of the Trinity River levees, and then part of the road was down in the floodplain, and that was supposed to be like the park access road. Hurricane Katrina happened. The Corps of Engineers got really strict about what you could and couldn't do with levees. So they nixed the idea of putting a road on top of the levee. Then through the engineering process, the traffic reliever part and the park access part kind of got combined, got put down into the floodplain. And as it got designed to be able to handle as many cars as they wanted to, have interchanges with different highways, it kind of became what a lot of people consider, a large-scale, high-speed highway. And that is what's referred to as Alternative 3C. Alternative 3C is also what the Corps and the Federal Highway Administration have approved to be built. So right now, 3C is the only thing so far that the city has clearance to actually construct. As the city was trying to get that approval, there was a lot of pushback against 3C because it is so big. So the mayor put together what's been called the Dream Team to kind of scale it back, design something smaller with more trees, more meanders. Some people say that the design speed is a lot slower. Then once that team finished their work, it went to what's called a kind of informally been called the technical team, which has been trying to take that vision for a smaller road to flesh it out more and to be able to submit that back to the feds to see if that's what they can build. So the big two ones I see that are in play are 3C, which is what's been approved, and then the technical team version, which is kind of still in the oven, not quite done, and we're not sure yet if that can be built. So is that pretty? Is that a good?
That's okay.
So I think the first question. Well, let's actually. How did each of you get involved in this project, and what is it that kind of formed your opinion of it?
Well, first of all, Brandon, thank you so much for moderating, and thanks to the GDPC for hosting us all this morning. I was elected to the Dallas City Council in 2005, and then Mayor Laura Miller appointed me to the Trinity River Council Committee. And I was very excited to be on it, and I was plunging into all of the big issues in the city. And I really wanted to understand the Trinity River Corridor project. And so the first thing I did is I jumped on my bike, and my husband and I rode our bikes from our house in the M Streets all the way down to the Trinity levees. And we drug our bikes up to the top of the levee, and in truth, my husband drug 2 bikes up the top of the levee. And this was the first time that I had actually been down into the basin. First thing I noticed was we have an incredible swath of green space that you really can't experience if you're just driving over it with a car. You just don't experience it on the bridges. So we took our bikes down into the basin and got down into the middle of it, and the first thing I noticed was how quiet it was. We were away from the bridges, and it was an incredibly beautiful experience in the heart of downtown. And because we have these 30 and 40 foot tall levees on each side of us, our city is blocked out in this area. And so you feel like you're part of nature and away from the city. And then you look up and see the skyline. And so I thought this was amazing, and I was so excited that we were doing a park down there, that the city citizens of Dallas had approved funding to build an incredible park. And so I went back and dug into the details at City Hall, and I wanted to understand the different components. There was the park, flood control, and then something called the toll road. And that's what struck me. I thought, wait a minute, certainly we're not putting a road down here in a floodway. And it was so incongruent with the park and flood control, I asked several times, are we really putting a large-scale road down here? And I got the schematics for the road, and it was really massive. And the thing I noticed was, when looking at the finances, the park had a little bit of money devoted to it. Flood control had a little bit more money devoted to it. And then the toll road had an enormous amount of money devoted to it. And I started to see that staff time was spent that way as well. And so it seemed to me that the focus had gone from the great imagery from 1998 in the park to the toll road. It didn't make a lot of sense to me that we were squandering an opportunity for a great urban park, one of the best in the country. And so I talked with my colleagues about their interest in working to remove the toll road, to move it out of the floodway and to find other solutions. I didn't gain any traction there. And so I worked with a bunch of other folks, and we had a referendum in 2007 to try to remove the toll road from the park. We were not successful, but since then I've been working and doing everything I can to try to create the Trinity Park and to try to remove the toll road.
No.
Give it a minute.
In the 1990s, Ron Kirk was mayor of Dallas, and he decided that doing something with the Trinity River was going to be one of his top priorities. He let me be his point man on that issue, point person, I should say. Later, I became the chairman of the Trinity River Corridor Citizens Committee, a 300-member group that was charged with coming up with a vision for the whole corridor. They made a recommendation. It was approved by the Park Board and the City Council, went to the referendum, as Brandon described, and the referendum passed. Now, that vision said that in the corridor, we needed to do flood control, recreation, transportation, and by the way, we wanted it to all engender economic development. That passed. Now, I firmly believe that it passed after all the various referendums for lakes and things in the corridor had failed, because we put together a package that appealed to everybody. Some people, for some unknown reason, didn't care about a park. What they cared about was flood control. Other people really cared about transportation because they were tired of being stuck in traffic. By putting all three together in one vision and one package, we passed the referendum. After that, part of the committee's recommendations was that there should be a nonprofit for the Trinity. The Trinity Commons Foundation was formed as that nonprofit, and the mission is to get what the voters approved done. And so that's what I've been doing for the last almost 20 years. And it has been a privilege, because bringing all those things together, and they're all necessary. It's primarily flood control. And the fact that we didn't have flooding during all the rains this past spring shows we've done that well. We now have a plan for a park and a parkway. From the very beginning, the notion has been that the parkway had to be compatible with the park, meaning the park was the most important part of it. It was not that the park should be compatible with the parkway. It is an exciting time, and I am looking forward to the next few years.
Given that, so the issue has gone to voters twice, in 98 and 07. Given that things have changed so much since then, would you support having another referendum or letting voters weigh in again on the current either 3C of Trinity Parkway or what ends up coming out of the technical team's work?
No, I would not. It would be a waste of time and money. The voters have approved this twice. In the last council election, we were told that this was going to be the parkway, the primary issue, and that 8 votes would be secured to stop the parkway. In the council's first meeting this year, they got a unanimous vote supporting the outcome of the charrette, which is the version I support also, and I would suspect everybody in the room does, which is a 4-lane, meandering, tree-lined parkway with a 45-mile-per-hour speed limit.
Yes, I would support a referendum. So much has changed in our city. And look, when we talk about the city council and the makeup of the city council, when I was on the council just a few years ago, I was the sole voice opposed to the Trinity Toll Road. Today, we have 6 people who oppose 3C. That's not a small number when you have a 15-member council. We have council races coming up this coming year. I anticipate, again, the Parkway will be an issue. So, yes, I think it's always important to listen to the members of the community, especially when you have new information, especially when we have other mobility choices that we can discuss.
And also, given that there's been so many different versions of this, do you think that that kind of confuses the public about what Trinity Parkway is and what's actually planned? Because I mean, it seems like every time, you know, it gets to, you know, a milestone, then it's almost like the process starts over and it starts getting redesigned. I mean, do you think that that confuses people, or that the public has a good grasp of what Trinity Parkway actually is?
The public, when I'm at church or at the grocery store, at a restaurant, the question the public asks me is, when are you going to get it built? And I think that is what they most care about. They think the issue has been settled. The confusion is because any project this big, and in 1996 when this started, I had no earthly idea how audacious Dallas was being, because no other city in the country has tried to put flood control, recreation, and transportation together. The ensuing designs have become more and more detailed and more specific, and reflect what all the public meetings and all the conversations say the public wants, which is a tree-lined parkway, not a 6-lane 3C.
All right, let's talk about what 3C is for 1 second, and you did a great job explaining that, but I just want everyone to understand 3C is the only approved version of this toll road. And I'm going to ask you to do me a favor. I want you to hold my mic for me for a second. Can you hold it up to my mouth? Thank you. 3C has 6 lanes. In a lot of places it has 8 lanes. It has shoulders on each side. Now, if I had more fingers, I could show you those shoulders. It has additional off-ramps and entrance ramps. It has half a dozen massive flyovers that get you in and out of the Trinity. So I want you to all have that vision in your head. That is what is approved. That is what the city of Dallas has said they're going to build. That is 3C. And when people talk to me at the supermarket, here's what they ask me. Where's the park? I have not had one person ask me, when are you going to build that toll road?
The smaller version that you're talking about, a lot of what's in that, we still don't know if that can be built, if the Corps is going to allow all the trees to be built along it. And the plan is that that's just going to be the first version of Trinity Parkway. That eventually, and the feds have said this is what they expect to happen, but that eventually, you know, the city will have to build out to the full version, even if they do start smaller. Do you think that I mean, let's say that what's being designed right now gets through the process, it gets approved, and that is what's initially built. Do you think that once that's done, that future councils will come back and build out to the bigger 3C, or do you think it'll just be left as the smaller version?
You know, in 1996, when we were doing this, nobody knew what a driverless car was. Nobody. If you had said that, people would say, is that an episode on Twilight Zone? Our technology is changing dramatically. I think that the winding tree-lined parkway is what will get built in Dallas. within 3C, according to the federal regulations, you can build something smaller. You're right, you have to go back and give them the details and ask permission. But considering that that's basically what everybody wants, I think they will say yes. They're still at the table discussing it. Now, for 30 or 40 years from now, when there might be some consideration of doing something else, those people have the right to make up their own mind, and I think they will. Personally, I suspect that technology will somehow have changed, and I can say this because I drive a Miata, all you people in those huge SUVs and huge pickups aren't going to be driving them. You're going to be driving something smaller. Thank you.
Your Miata is nice. Okay, let's talk about phase one. Let's talk about what that really looks like. We keep hearing it's going to be a tree-lined, beautiful, meandering road. Calling it a parkway does not make it a parkway. You have to look at the actual design and the specifics of it. Earlier this year, I served on the Trinity Task Force to look at the actual design of this road, along with Ambassador Kerr, Chancellor Lee Jackson, and others. And we dug down into the details of this road. Here's what we learned. This road has lanes the size of the high-speed road. It has shoulders that indicate it's a high-speed road. The curvature of the road indicates it's a high-speed road. The acceleration lanes, deceleration lanes are 3 football fields long. Why would you need that for a 45-mile-per-hour road? But look, we can debate all day whether we want to pour 10 million tons of concrete into the Trinity or 7 million tons of concrete into the Trinity, whether we want the lanes to be 10 feet or 12 feet, whether we want the shoulders to be grass or gravel, but we are missing the fundamental question, which is this. What is the problem that the Trinity Toll Road is trying to solve, and is the Trinity Toll Road the very best solution? And I would argue that the Trinity Toll Road 20 years ago might have been the answer. But we're in the 21st century now. And the cost of the Trinity Toll Road is not only monetary, it's opportunity cost, it's the cost to our park. And we have a chance now today to work with TxDOT on other smarter mobility solutions that take into account not just transportation, but economic development, quality of life, knitting neighborhoods back together. TxDOT just came out with CityMap, and it has a lot of mobility options that we should be looking at to address this very question, congestion in our core. So now is the time for us to make some smart choices about transportation and not depend on 20-year-old solutions for the 21st century.
If the city initially wants to build, well, first of all, you still support 3C, correct? Do you support 3C?
I support the Trinity Design Charrette, the 4-lane.
But what about 3C?
It is part of the record of decision.
Right, but do you support it? Like, do you
But we
support
can
it?
define
oppose it?
support.
Would you be okay with them building that?
Today?
Yeah.
Absolutely not. We don't need it.
What about later?
Later, it would depend on all kinds of conditions that we don't know about. And so I'm not going to take a stand one way or the other.
So, what do you see as the risks or benefits of the city just scrapping 3C altogether, starting over from scratch and taking something new, something more like what came out of the design charrette, or something like what the technical team's working on? What do you see as like the risk or benefits of them submitting that, like going back to square one and submitting that to the feds?
I see the risk is 20 years of work going down the drain and $43 million going down the drain. The city of Dallas spent $20 million getting the record of decision, doing all the studies for that. The Council of Governments spent $23 million. If we can build the meandering parkway within the record of decision and get permission from the Corps, that $43 million hasn't been wasted.
Look, we have to understand the impact on congestion. And we have no idea what the impact on congestion would be for phase one of the toll road. We do know that at full build out, at absolute full build out, 3C, the Trinity Toll Road will allow you to go 2 miles faster on our intercity highways. Now, it's going to cause congestion at other points, significant congestion. It's actually going to induce about 206,000 cars more on our intercity freeways than we would have otherwise. But it is going to reduce the number of cars on the Canyon and Mixmaster by 10,000. So let's weigh that. So what we need to do is do a traffic analysis of what the smaller so-called phase 1 would actually do. We don't know the answer to that, but if the bigger version of the road only reduces traffic by 2 miles per hour, common sense tells us that a phase 1 smaller version of the road would have negligible impact. And so why are we not examining other smarter transportation choices? Let's step back from this. Let's not throw good money after bad, and let's make some smarter choices.
What do you see as some of those other smarter transportation choices?
In the last couple of months, TxDOT came out with something called CityMap. They looked at exactly the same issue that TxDOT looked at 20 years ago with a major investment transportation study. And that is, how do we reduce congestion on our downtown highways? CityMap proposes a lot of different scenarios, and I think it's a great point of conversation to look at what happens when we lower I-30. Remember, I-30 has torn apart the neighborhoods in East Dallas. What if we could knit those back together? It looks at pulling down I-345. It looks at changes coming to 35. All of this together is going to address congestion. But this idea that we just want to go forward blindly with a version of the toll road that we're really uncertain about what impact it would have, when we now, today, have a roadmap from TxDOT that gives us incredible information, new information that looks at mobility, economic development, quality of life. We need to look at the full picture and reevaluate.
And just a second ago, you said that 3C isn't needed right now. What did you mean by that? Like, what about it isn't needed that the city may need later?
What the design charrette said was that in looking at the traffic numbers right now, the capacity for 3C is not needed. My debate coach at Bryan Adams High School in 1965 taught us that to always use the metaphor that you can drown in a river that is 1 foot deep, average depth. So I'm now going to prove Janice Whelan correct, as she always was. The 4-lane meandering tree-lined parkway will carry 70,200 vehicles per day. Now that is 70,200 vehicles that will not be on Stemmons, will not be cutting through neighborhoods. But I define that as improving traffic flow. Now when we talk about traffic, that's one of those words that we all think we know what it means, and it probably means something slightly different to everyone in this room. But Dallas, the North Texas region, historically grows 1.45 million people every 10 years. Dallas County is the one that attributes 1 million of that growth in population. So when we start talking about traffic today, we're also talking about way in the future, as all those new people move to Dallas. And we want them to, because that's what's called growth. So when you start looking at those numbers, this becomes a much more complicated issue. And if we want to see the growth come, and we want to at least have traffic not be worse than it is today, we have to do something. And a reliever route that will carry 70,200 vehicles per day is something that will improve it.
With the smaller version, the technical team version, right now they've said that to get good traffic estimates and to figure out how it's going to impact other highways and how it's going to impact 30 and 35, that they need to do about $2 to $3 million more dollars worth of work and need about another year or more. Do y'all think it's worth spending that time and money to find out that piece is exactly how traffic, or how a smaller version will affect traffic?
Yes, if we want to do what is best for the community. Unfortunately, plans and studies don't come free, and we will need to find that money somewhere in order to determine what is best.
I don't think it's necessary to spend $2 to $3 million or 15 to 18 months to understand the traffic impact of this design. What we've seen with CityMap is that they ran scenarios on various ways of rebuilding I-30, I-345, various scenarios of I-30, without the need to spend $2 to $3 million in 2 years on this. The COG has the ability to run this analysis today, right now. And so I think what we should ask for is we should ask TxDOT to run this phase 1 version through the same model that they used for I-30, I-345, I-35 and CityMap, and now we can compare. Now we can understand the impact of each of these scenarios against each other. That's not going to take, there's no reason for that to take more than a couple of weeks.
The parkway's not just, it's not the only aspect of the whole corridor project, and it's also not the only one that has kind of changed over time. Earlier this year, the mayor released a model of kind of a new vision for the park. Can you kind of share your thoughts on that?
I was incredibly pleased with what the mayor released for several reasons. And, as is evident, I've been going to public meetings on the Parkway, the park, the Trinity for over 20 years. And one of the questions that always comes up is the park is going to flood several times a year. Sometimes it floods and it's only a foot deep, sometimes it's 3 feet deep, but it still floods. How much is it going to cost to clean up? How are you going to do all that? And the new design addresses that beautifully. It says, we're not going to put all the swing sets down in the corridor. We're going to put them on overlooks that are above the levee. There will be 5 overlooks. That way, the question of flooding in this case becomes an asset, because one of the big lessons this spring was the hundreds of people that came out and stood on the Ronald Kirk Bridge to watch the water flow under the bridge, that it was a real attraction. Having grown up watching people at this White Rock Spillway do the same thing, I know that Dallas is fascinated with running water. And that's a big part of what the new plan, or revised or refined plan does. The other thing is we really are interested in economic development. If you put all the attractions down in the middle of the corridor, that corridor is 2,000 feet wide. So if we don't want a lot of parking lots in the corridor, and I don't think any of us do, that means that anyone using the park would have to walk about 1,000 feet. And again, Dallas ain't in love with that kind of stuff. But if you put the amenities for the park on the overlooks, and these are sizable overlooks, then they are immediately adjacent to new buildings, new office buildings, condominiums, apartments, mixed use, all that. So that if I live there or work there, rather than having to walk 10 or 20 minutes to get to the park, I can be in the park when I walk out the door of my building, which I think will encourage economic development plus lower maintenance costs.
I just went over earlier this week and looked at the model of this design at Dallas City Hall, and it's beautiful. This is the 9th redesign, reinvention of the Trinity Park over the last 40 years. But only one of those 9 designs has federal approval, and that's design number 8, the Balanced Vision Plan. Last April 2015, the Balanced Vision Plan Park was approved by the federal government. Now, what does that mean? That means that we spent $20 million and 12 years working to get approval from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And I took a look at, I'm holding I've never had this much money in my lap. This is $20 million worth of design. Now, to be clear, the design is so complex and detailed. It has hydrological analysis, topographical analysis, engineering analysis. All of those things went into this. Every blade of grass is detailed here. We're going to be throwing this out the window when we could be building the Balanced Vision Plan Park tomorrow. Now, the federal government told us 2 things about the Balanced Vision Plan Park. They said, number 1, Dallas, you have submitted 2 versions of the park, one with the toll road and one without. We approve both. That means we can build the park without the toll road, and there are amenities designed where the toll road would be. Second, you can phase in the Balanced Vision Plan Park. We don't have the money to do the entire Balanced Vision Plan, but that gives us an opportunity to do 2 things. We can both do the access points to the park that are in the Balanced Vision Plan, and we can also go back to the public and work with them and understand from them which of the Balanced Vision Plan pieces do they want to see first. Let's prioritize. And this is a great opportunity, but let's not lose sight of the fact that we can start moving dirt tomorrow. That's not an exaggeration. We have the federal approvals. We have $47 million of 1998 bond funds waiting at the City of Dallas that are from the Trinity River Project, 1998 bond funds that we can spend on this park. Let's get the park moving. The toll road should no longer hold this park hostage.
And I think with that, we'll just kind of kick it to the audience and see if y'all have any questions for either or both of our panelists.
I have a question back here. Please stand up.
Just a point of clarification. I was on your committee, by the way. I headed up economic development. Is it true that the funding for the Pegasus project is tied to an adequately designed tollway? And if so, what is the criteria that is going to be required in order for us to get that funding for the tollway and the Pegasus project?
Yeah.
So he's asking, you heard that the funding for the Pegasus project, which is the full-blown 30-35 rebuild, if the financing for that is tied to Trinity Parkway?
An adequately designed Trinity.
An adequately designed Trinity Parkway. I've never heard that.
And the answer is no. It's not. It is not tied. Now, we were told in 2007 we would never get any improvements to Project Pegasus, I-30 and I-35, unless we did the toll road. And guess what? We're already doing the horseshoe portion of Project Pegasus. There's talk now from TxDOT about going ahead and moving forward with lower Stemmons. That's going to create an enormous difference in improvement in traffic, just fixing lower Stemmons. And that'll be from 183 down to the toll road, tollway rather.
Remember Janice Wheatland's admonition to me. What the Texas Department of Transportation has consistently said was that they weren't going to approve and fund anything that brought more traffic into downtown Dallas unless we had a reliever route. And the Trinity Parkway is that reliever route. Now, that may not be a direct answer to your question, but that is what they have consistently said and why they are still at the table on that.
Any other questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. My name's Annie Melton, and my question is, what would happen for a park in the floodway besides the overlooks along the levees?
Mainly trails. the trails, there'll be a lake, there'll be, you can kayak, those kinds of things.
Here's the most important part of the park project in my mind. It's access. Right now, we cannot access, we're still lugging our bikes up the levee. My husband's still lugging 2 bikes up the levee. And so it makes sense to me that we start out with these I call them up and overs. I'm sure that's not the technical term, but it would allow bicycles, pedestrians, and cars to get down into our levees. They're also contemplated in the Balanced Vision Plan, very small, very modest, but parking lots down there. And that makes sense to actually get people down in there like at Sylvan. We can do that at other locations, like at Moore Park. We can do that at other locations. But access is the key here, and also crossing over the river. The Balanced Vision Plan has crossovers, which I think are incredible, because then you can get on both sides. You can only do that right now at Sylvan and way down at Moore unless you cross over one of the bridges.
The parkway design, the 4-lane road, because the bench is still there, actually increases access to the park, because within the curves, they put parking lots that allow people to walk directly into the park. Part of the recommendation is, because it's a tollway and you'll be using your toll tag, if you stay on the toll road for over an hour, i.e. park there to go to the park, the toll will be forgiven. You won't be charged.
Can I do a follow-up question about the park itself? Back in the days when we had the Trinity River Corridor Citizens Committee, there were actually 4 elements to it. There was the recreation, transportation, flood control, and finally environmental restoration, which is never mentioned anymore. And what I'm wondering is if there will be environmental restoration in the park.
Could you repeat the question?
So she's asking why the environmental restoration portion of the corridor project is, kind of gets short shrift, isn't, talked about a lot, and is wants more information on that part of the overall project.
Great question. I think it's not as sexy as the other parts, and it's not quite as controversial, but the environmental remediation has been a focus of city staff. It really has, and they've done incredible work on it, on the wetland portions of it. They've worked with the federal government on it. That's moved forward kind of under the radar, but that's ongoing.
I agree with Angela.
Should we stop the meeting right now? No. More questions. Yes. Lady?
What's the timeline on the completion for this technical team? And who's on this technical team?
So basically, actually, I think Jeremy, you're part of the technical team, aren't you? Okay, so if I get any of this wrong, feel free to correct me. As I understand it right now, the work has stopped since this spring. The mayor and some council members want public input on the work that the technical team has done so far before the council decides whether to spend that $2 or $3 million more dollars in another year or so to keep designing it more so they can submit it to the feds to get approval.
Have they I have a follow-up question. Have they submitted any of their, they've got to have criteria, do you have any criteria already established that you can submit to the feds? I don't see the purpose of continuing with this road design until we have real indication from the feds that we should continue, because I'm pretty sure they have their own set of criteria, and if this road already falls outside of that criteria, why are we continuing to spend that money and time to come up with something they're not going to approve?
You want to take any or all of that?
Sure. As you mentioned, we haven't been done any work recently. We've been on hold pending letting the park design advance, so we haven't done any work. The technical team hasn't on the parkway to let the park catch up, because that's been a big push. And then your last question, as far as what was the second question?
Well, do you have any indication, based on the alternative 3C report, what the Corps, how much leeway you have.
Sure. We've met with the technical team has met with the Corps in several technical team meetings that were held monthly in the early spring. And the Corps is on board with some of the changes. They don't think nothing's that nothing that can't be worked out, but they need a lot more details before they'll make those decisions. So that's kind of what's extra is needed.
So why don't we just build the park that's approved and stop? Because it sounds like it's going to
The
take
park?
2 more. Well, it sounds like it's going to take 2 more years to even get to some road design that then you submit. All of us have to admit the park hasn't happened because we've all been focused on a road for 20 years.
All I can say is they're working on the park now, and there's nothing that the park can't be built without the parkway.
And that's the Balanced Vision Plan park?
No, they are revising the BDP is what the park plan is doing
Newest
now.
new reinvention of the park.
Which one is that? I've totally lost count.
That's number 9, the Van Valkenburg plan.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you.
That's the new one.
There was a question back here, and then we have a couple.
Yeah.
I want to, I don't, when we went to the voters, the original recommendation from the Trinity River Corridor Citizens Committee had quite a few parts in it. The holdup has not been just the parkway. The holdup has been how all of the various federal regulatory agencies reviewed all the plans, because they'd never had, as I said earlier, they'd never had to do all 3 things in a floodplain. And so it took us probably 10 years to come up with a way to make that review. At this point, a big part of the park plan is, and the naturalization is changing the river from a straight line to a curving river, which is a really good thing. Will make it a more enjoyable park. But there are quite a few things that have to be decided, and it's not just the parkway that has held this up. Going back, working with the Corps is a very interesting thing, because you learn that as long as they haven't said no, they may say yes, but you have to just keep plugging at it. And for instance, if you build the park without the parkway, you have maybe 200 parking places. I now put on my Fair Park hat and tell you 200 parking places is nowhere near enough for a real park. And certainly not anywhere near enough if you want to have big special events in it. So we've got to look at this and work on it to make it the very best we can. And I think that's what we're doing.
Well, if the Trinity Toll Road is not holding up the park, then let's get started on the park. Because otherwise, if we're going to move forward on redesigning number 9 iteration of the park, we're going to be tossing out $20 million. We're going to have to find $20 million more for the new design, and we're going to spend, who knows, 5 to a dozen more years getting that newest new reinvented design approved. Let's move forward on the Balanced Vision Plan Park. We can do it tomorrow.
This is kind of a 2-part question. First, what would it take to get 3C off the table completely? And then, teamed with that, how do we know that a new road would be, I hear 45-mile-an-hour speed limit, and then I see what looks to me like a 60-mile-an-hour road. Anybody that's driven on the tollway know that we're not very good at obeying speed limit signs, so it's got to be something more than just a little sign telling us how fast to drive. I've been on the Blue Ridge Parkway, and it's really tough to drive faster than the 40-mile-an-hour posted speed limit. How can we make sure that if we do move forward with a road, that it's actually designed for a slower speed and not just a posted slower speed?
So the question is, first is how to get rid of alternative 3C, and then also how to design a road that ensures drivers go at slower speeds.
We get rid of 3C by either a vote on the council or a referendum, one of those two things. How do we ensure a slower road? Well, you design it that way. You design it so one of the things we looked at was the curvature of the meanders. The curvature of the meanders that we saw are 60, 65 mile per hour curves. So you don't determine how fast you go on a road. This is something I learned I didn't know about. You don't determine actually the speed limit on a road by the sign. The sign is not what TxDOT follows. It's actually the 85th percentile of the drivers. It's how fast will drivers go on this road. Look at the 85th percentile. I don't know about y'all, but Dallas drivers like to go fast, right? And they're going to try to go fast on this road. But again, I think that's kind of missing the forest for the trees. You know, if we keep focusing on the width of the lanes, and are the shoulders grass or gravel, and are the meanders 2,100 feet in radius or 1,800 feet in radius, we're missing an opportunity to truly address the mobility issues in central Dallas. We should be focused on other opportunities that are 21st century solutions, and we've got that before us.
I agree for the second time with Angela on how to get rid of 3C.
Do you want to get rid of it?
No, I don't want to get rid of 3C. I want to protect the record of decision. And as far as the speed limit, I pretty much agree with Angela also. You know, we're all going to drive as fast as we think we can get away with without getting a ticket. So we technically design it for 45 miles an hour. Again, personally, one of the reasons I drive a Miata is to take curves on two wheels, and I will continue to do that. And that usually means faster than 45 miles an hour.
Right.
I wouldn't want to ask everybody to raise a hand if they've been within the body of the levees that Angela started her speech out with. But if you haven't, let me encourage you to go drive to the end of whatever that street is where the Santa Fe Trail starts. Drive over the top of the levee, go down into that parking area, take a look at that beautiful verdant levee that is absolutely crystal green, and see the skyline of Dallas in the distance. It will bring a tear to your eye, I promise you. If you haven't sailed the Trinity River even straight in a canoe or a kayak, do that. It's unbelievably beautiful. Tree cover, cardinals flitting back and forth. It's a park that's there now. We should just get on with it.
Can I mention one thing to address that? One of the things we didn't mention about either 3C or Phase 1 of the road is that it also includes a 2.2 mile, 20-foot high concrete wall along the northern portion of the park. And that's to protect the toll road. We cannot berm it. The Corps has told us that. We can't put, it's going to be a concrete wall. Maybe we can paint it.
Last question.
What does it take to get the smaller tollway factored into the city map traffic study?
She's asking what it would take to get the smaller version of Trinity Parkway factored into the city map study that TxDOT's working on.
I don't know the answer to that, but I can tell you I made that request.
I know the answer to that.
Oh, Philip does.
The COG refused to include the toll road in city map. The designers of city map and the planners didn't want to include even a section on the Trinity Toll Road because it's not a TxDOT project and will never be a TxDOT project, I believe. During the city map process, toll road proponents demanded that it be included in city map, and they used a design that frankly doesn't match up with any design I've ever seen. The section in city map on the Trinity Toll Road is completely worthless.
And we should be clear, the section in city map that involves the Trinity Toll Road doesn't analyze the Trinity Toll Road itself. It analyzes the different scenarios with and without the toll road, with and without the phase one of the road. So it's weird. It's almost like there's a hole in this whole thing. We don't have a comparative analysis of phase one, and we have it for all these other scenarios. The numbers are there, so it's frustrating. We just can't get hold of them. But I would think all of us would want those numbers, right? I mean, we all want that.
And Angela, you can have the last word if you let me talk again.
Please go ahead.
I just wanted to reiterate what Bryce said, that the park is there. A few years ago, Hector and I celebrated our anniversary by canoeing down the river. And you can rent the canoes, and he's right. You see the skyline of Dallas. Angela's right. You can't hear anything. It's absolutely breathtaking. And then you go around a bend, and suddenly you're in a forest, and and the city's nowhere near you. It's really incredible, and I strongly encourage everyone to do it, not for a political reason, but just because you'll feel so much better if you do.
I agree with you, Craig. Well stated.
And thank you on that note.
Let me say one quick thing, though.
Sure.
I hope you guys can take away two things from this. One, we can start the park tomorrow, and two, there are better mobility solutions than the Trinity Toll Road.
Right. I think that's it. So will you please join me in thanking our speakers and moderators?